guys, Robert Max here, the Gold Key Geezer. Welcome to episode number 2. Thanks for stopping by. I hope everyone's doing well. This is not going to be a repeat episode from the old channel, but it's going to be a episode of a new acquisition, a short, sweet, but complete run that I picked up recently. And that is Dr.Spektor Presents Spine-Tingling Tales. This was a reprint comic that reprinted stories from Gold Key's various mystery and suspense titles, like Boris Karloff Tales of Mystery, Grimm's Ghost Stories, Ripley's Believe It or Not, Twilight Zone, titles like that. There were a few original stories. It was a 4-issue run, and in that run I think there were maybe 2 or 3 original stories. This is issue number 1. You can see Dr. Adam Spektor has his cameo at the top of the cover, and those of you who are familiar with the old channel know that he's one of my favorite original Gold Key characters. I would say him, Trag, and Mighty Samson are the top 3 for me. This is issue number 1, and speaking of Trag, on the cover of this issue, you see Trag and Lorne. You just see the back of their heads. There's a story inside this book that concerns the first werewolf, who you also see on the cover. But I believe the story takes place before the Sky Gods return to Earth, if you're familiar with Trag. So that's issue number 1, May 1975. Issue number 2, August of 75. You can see there's a mummy on the cover here. And that mummy is Rakatep, who would appear in Dr. Spektor's own title, The Occult Files of Dr. Spektor. Pretty interesting cover. Almost looks like it takes place in the Old West, which would really make it interesting with a mummy. So that's number 2. Here's number 3, November of 1975, and this one has a tagline that says it's a special sword and sorcery issue, and it features Dorak, another Gold Key original character. So that's number 3, November of 1975. And finally, the last issue, number 4, January 1976. Not sure why it was canceled. Probably poor sales. Who knows? But as you can see on this cover, there is a like a ghost pirate. So that's issue number 4, January 76. So like I said, short, sweet, but complete. We're going to put one of these books on the table. Well, we'll take a look at all the covers, and we're going to put one of the books on the table and take a closer look at one of the stories that caught my eye, and we'll do that when I get back, so I hope you stick around. Alrighty, we are back, and yes, this episode of Gold Key Geezer is sponsored by Migos Game Ball Buster. Remember, for adults it's exciting. You know, that wink at the end pretty much says it all. Alright, take a look at these covers. Dr. Spektor Presents Spine-Tingling Tales number 1. As mentioned earlier, this features Trag and Lorne and the supposed first werewolf. This tale is full of great 70s pseudoscience. I love it. But each one of these issues, you know, because all these stories are reprints, there's some new artwork on the first page, which is like an introductory page with Adam Spektor's cameo, and we get a little synopsis for every story. But as I mentioned in the, or maybe I didn't mention it, but the cover is a basic repurposing of the first panel, this half splash page or whatever you'd call it, from the first story, Cry of the Dire Wolf. The cover is credited to Jesse Santos, and he does do the art for at least the first story inside. So I get my information from Grand Comics Database. So take it as it were, or with a grain of salt. I think they're pretty reliable, but Jesse Santos is credited with this cover. That's issue 1. Issue number 2, I mentioned that it looked like it took place in the Old West. Well, that's not true, because we see on the first page here, or actually the first 2 pages, this guy is just dressed like kind of like an Indiana Jones treasure hunter type of character, and we see he's riding in a Jeep, and he's in the desert in Egypt, because there's the Sphinx right there. So anyway, that would have been really interesting if it would have taken place in the Old West, but it doesn't. Okay, whoops, that's number 1. Number 2. Number 3 is the one that's listed as a special sword and sorcery issue starring Dorak the Barbarian. Now, I believe Dorak the Barbarian appears regularly as a feature or as a recurring character in Tales of Sword and Sorcery, which most people call Dagar the Invincible. The actual title of the comic, per the indicia, is Tales of Sword and Sorcery. And once again, the artwork is credited on the cover to Jesse Santos. Now, I have no argument there, especially on covers 1. Well, actually, especially on this one, because, you know, I'm not the kind of comic book fan, and I wasn't when I was a kid, that can look at a cover and say, oh, that's Joe Kubert or whoever. There's a couple guys I can recognize. Kirby, sure, because I read a lot of Commandy, and the way he drew faces with, you know, the very strong chins and his style of drawing lips, I could just pick that out, and I see that in other Kirby work. Jesse Santos, at least for me, is another one. The line work, especially in hair, stands out to me in any of his work, and I don't really see it. Well, this isn't a good example, but I don't really see it in this cover for issue number 1. But he's credited with the artwork, and that's good enough for me. Now, issue 4, Grand Comics Database has no information, just a bunch of question marks for the artist for the cover. Doesn't look like anything else I've seen from Jesse Santos. But this is issue number 4, the final issue of this very short, sweet 4-issue run of reprint stories. And I said one story had caught my eye, and that is this story right here, A Tree Grows in Transylvania. Now, in Adam Spektor's new introduction, he says, among my most curious associations with the supernatural was my friendship with Baron Tibor, a Transylvanian nobleman who also happens to be one of the undead, a vampire. But Tibor was not always the tormented soul that I had grown to know. Let us go back 40 years before I met the Baron and observe as A Tree Grows in Transylvania. Now, so, you know, this book was published in January of 76, or the cover date's January of 76. I believe the first issue of The Occult Files of Dr. Spektor is 73, sometime in 1973. So I do know that Baron Tibor appears in the first issue of The Occult Files of Dr. Spektor. And I believe, well, no, I'm pretty sure he appears in a few other issues too. He's kind of like a character that Adam Spektor crosses paths with from time to time. And did you know, speaking of characters crossing paths, that there is actually, not very tightly knit, but there is a Gold Key universe. Characters from Trag and the Sky Gods have appeared in Dr. Spektor. The first Gold Key superhero, Dr. Solar, has appeared in The Occult Files of Dr. Spektor. So these characters have crossed over. But anyhow, so he tells that this tale, A Tree Grows in Transylvania, takes place 40 years ago. 40 years before he met Baron Tibor. So we'll go to that story. Oh, and before we get there, look, we got one of those great Roach design iron-on transfer ads. You know, when I was growing up, there was a T-shirt outlet in the area that on Saturday was, and I'm not saying every Saturday, but once in a while on a Saturday we would go there. And, this is in the days before readily available screen printed, rock band shirts were available. And this T-shirt outlet had tons of iron-on transfers that you could, buy a T-shirt and they would iron on the transfer for you. They even had the little fuzzy letters that you can get your name or, some kind of saying. You know what I'm talking about? They were iron-on letters. They were the little fuzzy things. And this place was really popular. And they had tons of these iron-on transfers on the walls, and you would pick it by a number or whatever. And a lot of those, not all of them, but a lot of them were these roach designs. So I recall seeing a lot of these at that T-shirt outlet, and also, when I would see them in a comic book, I would think, boy, I'd really like to get that someday. Okay, so looks like I went a little too far. So this story, excuse me, and I'm not going to go panel by panel with this, but like Adam Spektor mentioned, it takes place 40 years ago from the date of this book, so this is taking place 40 years before Adam Spektor meets Baron Tybor. And we see this young woman in a Transylvanian graveyard. We find out her name is Morgit. Now, I'm not familiar with that name. Is it Eastern European or German? I'm not sure. But that's her name here. And she encounters a bat while she's in this graveyard. It attacks her. But within moments, her father arrives and scares off the vampire bat with, of course, a crucifix. So he's carrying his daughter away because she has been bitten. And he mentions that this is the work of the vampire Baron Tybor. Now, we see in this panel, Tybor has returned to his normal form of a man. And this is his classic costume or uniform, with the cape and the top hat. So anyway, this father takes his daughter home. The doctor arrives, makes his diagnosis. Your daughter was bitten by one of the undead. At least she will not live and not return from the grave as a vampire. At least that's what the father is saying. So the doctor leaves, and I'm really not sure. Is she dead? It really doesn't matter. But the doctor leaves, and so the father kind of starts to set up defense in the house, hanging bags of garlic. And we see outside here, or maybe you don't see it, but I do. We see outside here Tybor's waiting for her, and there he is, like in his classic pose, or his classic costume with the top hat. So the father gets the rest of the town folk together to try to take out Baron Tybor. So, they form a mob, and they head to Tybor's castle to try to take him down. And they check inside the castle. They can't find him anywhere. They keep searching, nowhere to be found. But by that point, the sun, went down again. So, of course, he's able to rise. Now, apparently he was hanging out in the graveyard somewhere. I guess he didn't have to return to his coffin, in his native earth. I'm not sure. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this. This is a Don Glut, Jesse Santos collaboration on this story. So he calls for Morgit. Morgit, come to me, your master commands. So I guess she isn't dead. So she awakens in the house, returns to the graveyard, and Baron Tybor. And he is taking her into his arms, and he's claiming he's going to make her, undead like him, so that they can be together for all eternity. He's just getting ready to sink his teeth into her neck, and the villagers arrive. And at that moment, after we have a couple pages of ads, at that moment, just as he's getting ready to give her the bite, there's a tree behind him that starts to fall. It starts to crack. It's a dead, dying tree, and it falls on Tybor and impales him. It says, no time to evade the stake-like branches that jutted towards him. So he's stabbed. He's impaled by this tree, by this dying tree that just happened to fall down. The tree that grows in Transylvania. And within moments, Baron Tibor, who had drunk the blood of Transylvania for centuries, was no more than dry bones. Now, does he eventually turn to dust? I don't know. So, of course, now that Tibor is gone or released from his undead curse, Morgott is cured. You know, she's no longer becoming the undead. And the townspeople notice that, you know, the tree just fell over from age, but it almost seems as though it came to life, like it was moving. And one of the people says, well, look down there. And they looked into the pit. In other words, the area where the roots of the tree were, that when, you know, when the tree came out of the ground, it left this depression in the ground or a pit. And we can see there is a collection of skulls in there. And it says, over the years, the roots grew among the bones of the Baron's victims, almost as if their collective souls were in the tree, making it move. Perhaps they have all been avenged. Okay, and that's the end of the story. So, my question is, and I guess when I crack open the Occult Files of Dr. Spektor #1 and get it on the table, if Tibor was impaled and released from his undead curse, why does Adam Spektor encounter him 40 years later? Well, you know, either there's some explanation in the story or this story is just forgotten. Now, this story first appeared in Mystery Comics Digest #4, I believe in 1972. So about a year before, or something like a year before, the Occult Files of Dr. Spektor would have its first issue. But yeah, I'm really curious to see if whether or not Don Glut, you know, has some kind of continuity here between the Occult Files of Dr. Spektor #1 and this story, A Tree Grows in Transylvania, or if they just ignore it as like I said, comic books often or sometimes do. So, yeah, pretty interesting story, but like I said, the thing that really caught my eye is like, hey, this guy, you know, he appears, excuse me, in several issues, I believe, of the Occult Files of Dr. Spektor, and he's portrayed as a, you know, reluctant vampire, kind of like a Barnabas Collins type of character. Excuse me again, but I don't recall from #1 exactly if this story from 40 years ago is addressed. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of Gold Key Geezer. If you stuck around this long, I thank you for your patience and appreciate you watching. Please consider subscribing and liking this video, and also you can click the notification bell if you so wish, that when I get another video up, you'll be notified of that. And until then, take care.